Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today in this module, we will be discussing about landfill leachate management. In our previous modules, we discussed about what is waste, its characterization and what are its collection options, how do you collect it and what are the treatment and disposal options. Under disposal, we discussed about controlled dumping and uncontrolled dumping. Uncontrolled dumping is nothing but open dumps where the waste is disposed of as such without any protection to the environment. As I told you, open dumps or uncontrolled dumping, it does not have any protection. Protection in the sense it causes contamination or it pollutes the different matrices of the environment starting from the air, water, soil, etc. Controlled dumping on the other hand is nothing but containing your waste in a safe disposal option such as a landfill. So, landfill is nothing but an engineered structure which is provided with a liner, a cover and a proper way of dumping or loading a waste within a landfill. So, controlled dumping or landfills are always a safe option for disposal. In the previous modules, we have discussed about both uncontrolled dumping and controlled dumping, which you can refer in the previous modules. In this module, we will be discussing about landfill leachate management. So, before discussing about leachate management, you should know what is leachate. Leachate is nothing but a watery material that oozes out of the waste. Now, waste, as you all know, waste has some amount of moisture in them. If you talk about the biodegradable waste, we all know that it contains some amount of moisture, and once the degradation starts by bacterial activity or any microbial activity, they start leaving water. Now, this water comes out as a dark brown colored liquid called as leachate. Now, this leachate is highly toxic and it requires proper management before disposing it off. Otherwise, it will cause a lot of environmental pollution, like it will mainly affect the water and the soil aspect. Now, with this introduction, let us get into the module and let us look into the learning objectives. The learning objectives of this module will be to understand the process of leachate generation, to know the composition and characteristics of landfill leachate, to know the factors influencing the composition of leachate. Then we will estimate how to quantify the leachate that is being generated from these landfills. Then we will also discuss about the landfill leachate collection systems, and finally we will discuss about the different treatment options available for leachate treatment. Now, as I told you, first we will start off with what is a landfill. Now, landfill is an engineered structure for the containment of a domestic and industrial solid waste. It is one of the controlled disposal options. Now, they are located in a remote area, mainly outskirts of the city, so that it will prevent environmental risks and ensure human safety. The waste that is being disposed in landfills, they will undergo decomposition over a period of time and they release various gases and a toxic liquid called as leachate. Now, the gases are mainly greenhouse gases like methane, carbon dioxide, NOx, etc. Now, the leachate, when you talk about, it is a watery liquid that oozes out from the waste material during its decomposition. Now, as I told you, it is a dark brown colored liquid and it has a lot of components in them, like you can find soluble components of the waste, you can find a lot of suspended solids and other degraded products. The characteristics of the leachate will always depend on the composition of waste, the presence of biodegradable substance in them, moisture content, weather conditions, waste holding time and other operational procedures. If the landfill is not properly managed, then this leachate can seep into the groundwater and it will contaminate the entire aquifer. Now, you all know aquifer is a source from which the groundwater is obtained. Now, leachate generation in landfill is influenced by a number of factors, starting from your rainfall, the cover material, waste type, vegetation, climatic condition and the landfill design. Now, let us look into the composition of leachate. Now, leachate is a blackish, orangish or yellowish liquid that emits a very strong odor. The strong odor can be attributed to presence of hydrogen, nitrogen and other sulfur rich organic compounds. So, now this table will provide you an idea about the composition of waste. I am sure you know what is acetogenic and methanogenic leachate. It is the leachate that is generated at the different phases of degradation. So, since in the previous module also we discussed about what is the phases of degradation that occurs within a landfill. So, the anaerobic degradation has 4 phases of degradation like the hydrolysis, and then goes the acidogenesis, acetogenesis and methanogenesis. So, acetogenic leachate is nothing but that is generated during the acetogenic phase, and methanogenic leachate is one that is generated during the methanogenic phase within the landfill. Now, this table will provide you the composition of acetogenic and methanogenic leachate that is generated from a very large landfill with a very high waste input rate and a relatively dry environment. Now, all the values are provided in milligram per liter except for few values like the conductivity, pH and all, it is not in milligram per liter. So, if you compare it and see acetogenic and methanogenic leachate, the pH value of the acetogenic leachate is 6.73 and in methanogenic it is up to 7.52, because you all know the methanogenic bacteria becomes active only in a slightly alkaline pH. Now, when you talk about the COD, the COD values are very high at acetogenic phase than compared to the methanogenic phase, because by that time the COD would have been utilized by the bacteria and it has been converted into methane. Now, BOD it's not very comparable. If you see the BOD values, the value of BOD depends upon the amount of biodegradable material within the landfills or the waste material. Now, again if you talk about the ammonia nitrogen, I mean the ammonical nitrogen, you can see it is around 922 in acetogenic leachate and it is slightly lesser than the acetogenic leachate in methanogenic leachate. Okay. So, likewise you can see a list of other parameters which are mentioned here, and generally if you see the alkalinity also gets reduced at the end of anaerobic degradation. pH, alkalinity, VFA, they play a major role under the anaerobic condition. So, as I told you earlier, the degradation within the landfill is anaerobic in nature and it follows 4 different phases, starting from hydrolysis, acidogenesis, acetogenesis and methanogenesis. So, those 4 stages we will be discussing here. So, hydrolysis starts during the initial period when you have some amount of oxygen either in the free or combined form in the waste. So, during the initial period aerobic degradation occurs and as results in the formation of minimum leachate. Now, it contains a major amount of carbonic acid as a major constituent. Here the pH of the leachate would be acidic in nature. The next phase is fermentation and acetogenesis. Now, in this stage, this is the stage 2 and stage 3, where in this phase the composition of leachate is greatly influenced. A major proportion of complex waste is degraded into simpler substances, especially the organic acids, ammonia and hydrogen. Again, the pH here drops below 4 and it increases the solubility of metals. The leachate produced during the acetogenic phase contain a high amount of COD around 1,52,000 milligram per liter, ammoniacal nitrogen around 922 milligram per liter and other heavy metals. Now, higher levels of ammonia are contributed by biodegradation of proteins and other nitrogenous compounds which are present in the waste material. The BOD by COD ratio is very high for leachate generated during stage 3, indicating a high level of organic materials and its biodegradability. Now, stage 4 is the last stage and it is called as methanogenesis. Now, here the leachate of varying composition is produced. The methanogenic leachate is generally alkaline in nature and shows a pH of around 7.52. The degradation of organic acid to methane and carbon dioxide results in the pH shift. Again, here the solubility of metals are restricted because the pH level has increased from 4 to 7.52. The COD and the BOD of the methanogenic leachate are comparatively lesser than the acetogenic leachate, which we have already seen in the previous table. Now, the concentration of ammonical nitrogen almost it remains same throughout the different phases, and it remains high even in the methanogenic leachate. Again, this we have discussed in the given in the previous slides. Now, let us see how nature of waste influences the composition of leachate. Municipal solid waste generally generates leachate that are high in organic matter and ammonia. Now, the hazardous waste landfills generate leachate having a very highly variable concentration containing salts, metals, halogenated compounds and other organic compounds. Now, the leachate from inert landfills contain minimum amount of organic and inorganic species. Inert means when you example you can talk about construction and demolition waste, they are considered inert. There you cannot find a large amount of organic, but less amount of organic and inorganic species are found. The next parameter that influences the composition of leachate is the decomposition rate and weather conditions. Now, on seepage of water during precipitation through the waste, anoxic condition is created by the bacteria and fungi, and they consume all the available oxygen. The waste further undergoes decomposition and it causes increase in temperature and a drop in pH. Now, due to this, the metal ions are dissociated and it enters into the leachate, which is insoluble in neutral pH. Now, the waste undergoing composition processes release water, adding volume to the leachate. Now, let us discuss about how to estimate the amount of leachate that will be generated in a particular landfill. There are a lot of factors that greatly influence the leachate generation. Some of them are listed below, like the amount of rainfall, amount and rate of rainwater infiltration through the landfill, potential of waste to absorb water, amount of liquid waste disposed in the landfill, weight of the waste after the absorption of water, and leakage via seepage or discharge. Now, there is an equation given here from which you can calculate or estimate the amount of leachate generated, especially for the municipal solid waste. L naught is equal to ER plus LIW plus IRA minus LTP plus AW plus DL. Now, what is L naught is? That is the free leachate retained at the site. That is nothing but the leachate production minus leachate leaving the site. Now, ER will be the effective rainfall, that is actual or on active surface area. This may be modified depending upon the runoff, especially after capping, I mean the landfill cover. LIW will be the liquid industrial waste, including any surplus water from sludges. IRA will include infiltration through restored and capped area. LTP will be the discharge of leachate off-site. A is the unit absorptive capacity of the waste. W will be the weight of absorptive waste, and DL will be the designed seepage if anything available. Management aspects, how we can manage the leachate. The leachate is collected in the ponds through extraction of leachate from the waste containing landfill cell by using a leachate collection system. This again we have discussed in the controlled landfills, I mean the structure of landfills. We have discussed about the liner system, how to load the waste, and we have discussed also about the landfill covers. The leachate cells are lined using synthetic material or a clay liner, which is a natural liner material. The liner system prevents the leachate from seeping through the soils underneath. The leachate ponds commonly uses a floating aerator, which helps in treating it, and it reduces the odor that is generated by the leachate by preventing it from becoming anaerobic. The pond also induces evaporation and reduces the volume of leachate. The sludge that is formed in the pond is removed from time to time, and they are deposited back into the landfill for safe storage or disposal. Now, let us look into the components of leachate collection system. The components of leachate collection system will include a pump, manholes, discharge lines and liquid level monitors. The overall efficiency of the system is generally governed by liners, filters, pumps and sumps. So, first let us look about the liners. Now, the liners are both used for leachate collection and as a separating device within the landfill. Now, as I told you, liners can be both natural as well as synthetic, and it protects the soil and groundwater that is present underneath. The liner should be strong, impermeable, flexible, and it should possess a high tensile strength. Also, it should be tolerant to fluctuations in temperature, and it should be black in color. Black in color, why? Because it will resist UV light. It should also be easy to install, and it should be cheap and resistant to scratch. Also, it should be stable and it should resist any chemical degradation by leachate. The commonly used liners are geomembranes, geosynthetic clay liners, geotextiles, geocomposites, geonets and geogrids. The geomembranes are utilized as a barrier between mobile polluting materials that is released from the waste and into the groundwater. They are generally used for closing of landfills to provide low permeability cover barrier and restrict the intrusion of rainwater into the waste material. Now, the geosynthetic clay liners are prepared by spreading sodium bentonite solution uniformly between an oven and a non-oven geotextile material. Now, sodium bentonite, again it has a very low permeability. Now, geotextiles are used as partition between two different types of soils to check the pollution of lower layer by the upper stratum. It also protects the synthetic layers against perforation from underlying and overlying rocks. Geogrids are kind of structural synthetic material utilized in slope surfaces to maintain its stability and create a stable cover soil over the synthetic liners. The next type, the geonets, are a kind of synthetic materials which are generally used instead of sand and gravel. That means it has a little greater pore size. It looks like a net like material. Now, geocomposites are a combination of both synthetic, either it can be a synthetic material or it can be a synthetic natural material. These geocomposites act like a filter and a drainage medium. Now, after liners, now let us look into the leachate drainage system. The leachate drainage system is used to collect and transport the leachate which is collected within the liner system. The pipes of the drainage system are located at the bottom of the cell. The pipeline networks should be flexible or rigid, but the joints connecting these pipeline network should be flexible to withhold the enormous amount of weight and pressure provided by the waste material which is loaded on top of the leachate drainage system. Now, the collection pipe network drains, collect, transport the leachate throughout the drainage layer to the collection sump, where it is separated and taken up for the treatment or disposal. The pipe network also helps in draining the waste within the drainage system to reduce the mounting of leachate. Now, these pipes are generally fabricated with cuts so that they can be inclined to 120-degree angle and thereby prevent the entry of solid particles. Next comes the filters. The filter layer are used on top of the drainage layer in leachate collection system. Two types of filters are used. They can be granular or geotextile. Granular filters, they come with one or more soil layers with a coarse gradation in the direction of leakage to protect the soil. When the liquid enters the landfill cell, it progresses down the filter, passes through the pipeline and rests in the sump. For efficient operation, the number, location, size of the sumps are very, very important. The size of the sump is larger in the areas falling under higher than average rainfall. That means wherever you have the areas where the rainfall is higher than the average, there you should have a larger sump, because leachate generation also depends upon the amount of rainfall. Now, the larger the pump capacity, smaller should be the sump size. It is vital for the capacity of the sump to be able to accumulate more amount of leachate, I mean more than the expected level of leachate that would be generated. Now, next is the membrane and collection for treatment. Some landfills are equipped with certain forms of membranes. This is used to separate the waste from the surrounding ground. In such sites, the leachate collection pipe network is laid on this membrane. The membranes are usually porous to some extent because with time a low volume of leachate crosses the membrane. That means the solid materials that are present in the leachate will slowly keep blocking the pores which are there in the membrane. Now, the leachate that is collected can be re-injected back into the waste material. That means they can be recirculated back. Now, by doing so, what will happen is it will increase the moisture that is present in the landfill. The moisture is there, again it will accelerate the rate of decomposition and the rate of gas production. Also, it will favor the growth of microorganisms, and the materials that are present in the leachate, the partially degraded or undegraded material, when you recirculate it back into the landfill, they will undergo further degradation. So, that is the advantage of recirculating them. So, you can re-inject the liquid leachate back into the landfill for the above mentioned characteristic. Now, with this as a basis, now let us look into the various treatment options that are available for the leachate that is generated from the various landfills. Now, in leachate treatment, the leachate is pumped from the sump into a treatment container where it is mixed with certain chemical reagents to adjust the pH, coagulate and settle the solids. By doing so, it will also reduce the concentration of hazardous substances. The treatment methods for landfill leachate are generally classified as biological, physicochemical and a combination of biological and physicochemical methods. Now, let us look into each of these methods in detail. Now, under the biological methods, in this figure if you see, there are different methods which are available. A few of the methods are mentioned in this slide, like for example, the rotating biological contractors, sequencing batch reactors, reed beds, biological aerated filters. These are few of the reactors that are used for treating leachate in addition to the activated sludge process. Now, let us look into each of this in detail. So, under the biological method, the main biological process that is used for the leachate treatment is the activated sludge process, or also called as an ASP. Now, you know what is an activated sludge process? Activated sludge process is nothing but you have a aeration tank where the waste would be, the waste water would be subjected to a mass of organisms, and this microorganisms will take up the substrate, will consume, and then they will multiply and produce an active mass of microorganisms. And the next unit within the activated sludge process is a secondary clarifier, where the water, the waste water that is treated along with the biomass is transferred into a secondary clarifier, and in the secondary clarifier they are allowed to settle or they are retained for a period of 2 hours, where the suspended solid materials are settled down and the clear supernatant is taken into the next treatment unit. So, in an activated sludge process, oxygen is provided in the aeration tank as the leachate flows into the system. The microorganisms which are present in the system, they thrive in the tank and they form biological flocks. The microorganisms which are in suspension, they will start consuming the organic matter in the leachate and they will transform them into new microbial biomass in addition to producing carbon dioxide and water. So, you all know like the simple basic equation, like the glucose is converted or oxidized into carbon dioxide water along with heat, the basic the equation where the oxidation of glucose occurs. The microbial activity reduces the organic content that is present in the leachate. Now, as I told you, the second unit which is present in the activated sludge process is a clarifier or a settling tank, where the sludge formed in the aeration tank are brought into the clarifier and it is allowed to settle by providing a retention time of around 2 hours. Now, the sludge that is settled at the floor is then removed from the clarifiers, and a part of it is recycled back to the aeration tank as an inoculum for treating more leachate, and the supernatant that is generated from the secondary clarifier is taken as runoff or as effluent. The second unit that is popularly used for leachate collection is the rotating biological contactors. The rotating biological contactors are also called as biorotor that uses a attached growth system. In this, if you see, you have a circular wheel or a disc that is made up of plastic and it is mounted on a shaft. The half a portion of the disc or shaft is submerged in a tank which is holding the leachate water. Now, what happens, the shaft keeps rotating and the microorganisms start attaching itself onto the plastic disc. So, when the disc is submerged, the half disc, when it is submerged in the leachate, it will take up the nutrients, and once the shaft goes up or it is rotated, the microorganisms attached portion goes on top and it will take up the oxygen, and once again when it comes back down, it will take the substrate from the leachate, I mean the organic content, whatever requirement it will be taking, it will take it from the substrate. Sorry, it will take from the wastewater, and when it goes up, it will take up oxygen. So, that is the basic working principle of a rotating biological contactors. So, as a shaft rotates, the microorganisms will adhere to the disc, they will assimilate and treat the organic matter that is present in the leachate. So, at the bottom, when it comes to the trough where the wastewater is loaded, there it will take up the substrate, and when it goes above, it will take up oxygen. So, the performance, if you see the performance aspect of the rotating biological contactor, they are much lower than the activated sludge process. This is again due to the attached microorganisms. The suspended microorganisms show more efficiency, like which is more clear in an activated sludge process than your rotating biological contactors, because the microorganisms which perform the degradation are only attached and they are very small in number. The next type of reactor that is used for leachate treatment is the sequencing batch reactor. In the sequencing batch reactor, the process occurs in a single unit in a series. Like it will have 5 different phases starting from your fill, then it will be react, then you settle, then you have decant and you have idle. So, these are the 5 different phases that occurs in a sequencing batch reactor. So, in a fill condition, you will fill the wastewater into the unit where you will have a mass of microorganisms in the reactor. Once the fill is done, then you will aerate the mixture and you will allow the contact of the microorganisms with the liquid. Then comes your settling period, which is similar to your secondary clarifier or secondary sedimentation tank. You allow a retention period, you allow the solid material to settle down, and the supernatant will be decanted, which is carried out in the next phase. After decantation, it is the idle phase, you leave it idle for some time and then again the process continues. So, everything occurs in a one single unit, that is the sequencing batch reactor. The next type of unit is the reed beds. Now, reed beds are, you might have heard about the constructed wetlands. So, it is similar to that. Now, reed beds come with gentle sloping bed lined with impermeable or impervious barrier, and they are fixed with emergent hydrophytes like some reeds like phragmites, bulrush, cattails, that is typha, etc. Typha and phragmites are more popularly used species in constructed wetlands or reed beds. Now, the reed beds have an inlet zone of crushed stones to distribute the wastewater or the leachate uniformly over the bed, with an outlet zone of compacted stone to collect the effluent on the other side. Now, the leachate that enters into the inlet will move slowly through the bed following a horizontal path. Now, as the leachate flows, oxygen circulates into the bed. Then an aerobic bacteria surrounding the rhizome of the reeds will start consuming the organic substance and oxidize them. So, as the leachate moves through the reed bed, by the time it reaches the outlet, it will be oxidized and it will be treated. Now, the gravel or soil in which the reeds are planted will act like a filter medium to retain the suspended solids which are present in the leachate. The next type of unit is a biological aerated filters. A biological aerated filter is a treatment tank with submerged aerated fixed film biological filtration system, which provide a surface for the biomass and hold back suspended solid. It acts as a biological contactor and a filter and eliminates the need for a separate sedimentation step. Now, apart from these treatment systems which are discussed in the previous slides, there are also other treatment units used for leachate treatment. They include the upflow anaerobic sludge blanket reactor or the UASB reactor, moving bed biological or biofilm reactor MBBR, and even MBRs are used for treatment of leachate. In addition to this, you also have anaerobic filters for leachate treatment. Now, let us look into the various physicochemical treatment of leachate. Now, the physicochemical treatment, again it will include lot many process. We will see each one in detail. Now, let us start with adsorption. Adsorption is a process of accumulating substances in a solution on a suitable interface, and it involves the transfer of constituents in the liquid phase to the solid phase. Now, the most popularly used adsorbents are the synthetic polymeric materials. Like the most commonly used adsorbents are the activated carbon, silica based adsorbents, synthetic polymers, and many others. Now, as I told you, activated carbon is more popularly used, and they are used in advanced wastewater treatment applications. Now, PACT, powdered activated carbon, also has application as an adsorbent and also has a popular application as an adsorbent. The process involves a continuous addition of PAC to the activated sludge bioreactor to absorb the toxic contaminants that are present in the leachate. Now, the adsorbed sludge will then later be removed and incinerated to destroy the organics. The adsorption step always requires a pre-treatment, because if pre-treatment is not done, the suspended solid material will block the pores of the activated carbon and the adsorption will not be very effective. So, the suspended solids must be removed before subjecting leachate to carbon adsorption process. Otherwise, the suspended material, grease or oil that is present in the leachate will start accumulating on the surface of the adsorbent. So, then you have to remove it and regenerate it. So, this affects the process. You need to pre-treat and then subject it to adsorption. So, this treatment process, that is the adsorption, has advantages because it does not require any precipitation and sedimentation. The next physicochemical method that is used is membrane technology. Here membranes, again membranes are semi-permeable material, okay, are selectively permeable material which allows only certain compounds to pass through and retain some other compounds. So, membranes are used as a final or polishing step in leachate treatment. So, it is not used initially, it is used either at the end or the final stage of leachate treatment. The microfiltration and ultrafiltrations are popularly used for leachate treatment. This is generally used for removing organic material from the leachate. The best application of membrane technology is generally carried out at the site of leachate generation, where when it contains only one primary contaminant, then you can use the membrane at the site of leachate generation. Now, these membranes have a greater productivity and chemical resistance. That is why microfiltration and ultrafiltration have a greater application in leachate treatment. Reverse osmosis process is not being used in a full scale treatment of waste leachate, because the reverse osmosis membranes are very delicate in nature and they are the pore size is very less. So, the initial stages itself, the fouling or blocking problem will be more, and it will increase the cost. You have to replace the membrane continuously. So, generally reverse osmosis membranes are not used at the initial stages, and they are generally used at the end, that is during the polishing step at the end of treatment process. Reverse osmosis generally remove dissolved inorganic materials like metals, metal cyanide complexes and other ionic compounds. So, as mentioned earlier, the leachate should always be pre-treated before being subjected to a reverse osmosis process. The next type of physicochemical treatment is chemical treatment. Here certain chemicals will be used to detoxify or remove harmful constituents that are present in the leachate. Now, the chemical methods will be very fast and they do not cause any damage to the setup. Now, some of the chemical methods include coagulation, precipitation, chemical oxidation and ammonia stripping. Now, under coagulation and precipitation, the process involves addition of certain chemicals to the leachate, where the chemicals or the chemicals will act to the impurities that are present in the leachate and they will coagulate them or precipitate them, which can be further removed by settling or sedimentation. This treatment method is useful on leachate which is having a very high molecular weight organic compounds like the humic acid, fulvic acid, etc. The second type of process is chemical oxidation, where the materials which are present in the leachate are degraded by oxidation and they are transformed into a variety of other compounds. So, the different chemical oxidants are used, that they can be hydrogen peroxide, ozone, chlorine, because they all have oxidation potential. So, that is why they are popularly used for chemical oxidation process. Now, there is an important point you should remember while performing the oxidation process, because you have to check the oxidation ability of the oxidant, because these the leachate have a lot of organic material in them. So, you have to check the oxidation ability of any particular chemical or the oxidizing agent, and then you use it into the chemical oxidation process. So, more the oxidation ability, better will be the oxidation. So, that is why you have to prefer a chemical which is having higher oxidation potential. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to hydrogen peroxide, the ozone, chlorine, you also have other oxidants like potassium permanganate, calcium hypochloride, etc. The last method in physiochemical treatment that comes under chemical treatment is your ammonia stripping. Now, this is mainly used to remove ammonia. In ammonia stripping, large quantity of air is passed over exposed surface of leachate and it causes a partial pressure of ammonia gas within the water to convert ammonia in the liquid to the gas phase. Now, the ammonia stripping can be used by water falling through a flow of air in the form of bubbles. Now, stripping towers have been found to be more effective since there is a better contact between the gas and the liquid phases when dispersion of liquid takes place in the form of fine droplets. Now, to summarize this module, at the end of this module we have discussed or we have studied about what is landfill. A basic definition we discussed about what is a landfill, we discussed about controlled and uncontrolled dumping. Under controlled dumping, it is also called which is also called as landfills. We discussed about what are the different layers that are present in the landfills. Then we discussed about leachate, which is a watery liquid that oozes out from the waste material during its degradation process. We also discussed about how these leachate is generated, or what are the composition of landfill leachate, what are the factors that influence the quantity of leachate generation, quantity as well as the composition of leachate, and we discussed about how to estimate the landfill leachate generation in a particular landfill. Then we discussed about what are the different landfill leachate collection system, like we discussed about the liners, we discussed about filters, membranes, then the pipelines and sumps, pumps, etc. We also discussed about the membranes, the collection system, different liners being used and so on. Finally, we discussed about the various treatment options that are available for a landfill leachate treatment, like the biological treatment system and the physiochemical treatment process that are available. I hope the module would be of help to you. Thank you.